It was a quiet Tuesday evening at the upscale Riverside Grill, a place known for its polished service and waterfront views. Samuel Carter, a 72-year-old black man with a slight limp and a gentle smile, stepped through the glass doors, his weathered hands gripping a cane. He wore a neatly pressed blazer, a crisp white shirt, and a tie knotted with care. The restaurant's warm lights reflected off his glasses, giving him an air of quiet dignity. He'd come to meet an old friend, someone he hadn't seen in years, and he looked forward to a simple meal and good conversation. But what unfolded that night would leave the entire restaurant stunned, as a waiter's cruel assumptions unraveled in the face of a revelation no one saw coming, a CIA badge that turned prejudice into regret. Samuel walked toward the hostess stand, his cane tapping softly against the polished floor. The young woman behind the stand, Emily, greeted him with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone polite but practiced. Samuel nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, under Carter, for 2 at 7 o'clock. Emily scanned her tablet, found the name, and gestured toward the dining area. "Right this way, Mr. Carter." She led him to a small table near the window, where the river's gentle ripples caught the last of the sunset. Samuel thanked her and settled into his chair, glancing at his watch. His friend, James, was running a few minutes late, but that was no surprise. James had always been the type to arrive fashionably delayed. The dining room buzzed with the low hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the occasional laugh. Families, couples, and business types filled the tables, their faces lit by candlelight. Samuel adjusted his glasses and pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping through pages filled with neat handwriting. He wasn't one to sit idle. Even at his age, his mind stayed sharp, always working, always observing. He'd spent decades honing that skill, though no one in the restaurant would have guessed it. Enter Ryan, a waiter in his mid-20s with slicked-back hair and a smug grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ryan had been at Riverside Grill for just over a year, known among the staff for his quick charm with certain customers and his sharp tongue with others. He prided himself on reading people, or so he thought, and tonight, his eyes locked onto Samuel with a flicker of disdain. To Ryan, Samuel didn't fit the mold of the restaurant's usual clientele. Wealthy, connected, and in Ryan's mind, a certain kind of look. Samuel's age, his race, and the modest cut of his blazer set off alarms in Ryan's head. He approached the table, his posture stiff, his smile forced. "Good evening," Ryan said, his voice clipped. "Can I get you something to drink while you wait for whoever you're expecting?" The pause was deliberate, laced with a hint of skepticism, as if Samuel's presence required justification. Samuel looked up, meeting Ryan's gaze with calm confidence. "Just water for now, thank you," he replied, his tone even. Ryan nodded curtly and walked away, muttering under his breath to a coworker at the bar. "Guy looks like he wandered in from the wrong side of town," he said, loud enough for a nearby server to overhear. The coworker, a younger woman named Mia, frowned but said nothing. She'd seen Ryan act like this before. Quick to judge, quicker to dismiss. Samuel, unaware of the comment, sipped his water when it arrived and glanced at the menu. He wasn't here for the food, not really. The meeting with James was the priority, a chance to reconnect and discuss matters that went far beyond the restaurant's overpriced steak and seafood. James had been a colleague once, back in the days when Samuel's work took him to corners of the world most people only saw in movies. They'd shared late nights in safe houses, tense moments in foreign capitals, and a bond forged through trust and survival. But those days were long behind Samuel, or so he told himself. Retirement hadn't dulled his instincts, though, and he could feel Ryan's eyes on him from across the room. Ryan returned a few minutes later, his demeanor colder than before. "You sure you're at the right place?" he asked, his tone barely masking his irritation. "This is a high-end restaurant, and we have a certain standard." The words hung in the air, sharp and pointed. Samuel raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said, his voice steady but firm. Ryan scoffed, folding his arms. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but if you're not ordering something substantial, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." We've got paying customers waiting." The accusation landed like a slap, drawing the attention of nearby diners. A couple at the next table glanced over, their conversation pausing. Mia, wiping down a tray nearby, froze, her eyes darting between Ryan and Samuel. Samuel leaned back in his chair, his hands resting calmly on the table. "I'm waiting for my friend," he said. "I'll order when he arrives." Ryan's jaw tightened, his patience fraying. "Yeah, well, we don't have time for people loitering. If you're not here to spend money, you need to go." The room seemed to quiet, the tension palpable. Samuel's gaze didn't waver, but his voice took on a quieter, more deliberate edge. "I'd suggest you rethink your approach, son," he said, the word son carrying a weight that made Ryan flinch. But Ryan doubled down, his voice rising just enough to draw more eyes. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Get up and leave, or I'll get the manager." Samuel didn't move, his expression calm but unyielding. "Go get your manager," he said simply. Ryan stormed off, his face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. He found the manager, Karen, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd been running Riverside Grill for a decade. She was in the back, checking inventory, when Ryan burst in. "There's some old guy out there causing trouble," he said, his voice dripping with indignation. "He's just sitting there, not ordering, and he doesn't belong here. I told him to leave, but he's refusing." Karen raised an eyebrow, sensing Ryan's exaggeration. "Did he do anything disruptive?" she asked. Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but he's, not our usual type. I think he's just here to waste our time." Karen sighed, knowing Ryan's tendency to jump to conclusions. She followed him back to the dining room, where Samuel sat quietly, his notebook now closed. Karen approached the table, her demeanor professional but warm. "Good evening, sir. Is there an issue here?" she asked, glancing between Samuel and Ryan. Samuel smiled faintly, his eyes sharp. "No issue on my end. I'm waiting for my friend, and your waiter seems to think I don't belong here." Karen's face tightened, and she shot Ryan a look. "I'm sorry for any misunderstanding," she said. "You're welcome to stay. Can I get you anything while you wait?" Before Samuel could respond, Ryan cut in, his voice louder now. "This is ridiculous. He's just taking up space. We have actual customers who need this table." The outburst drew gasps from nearby tables, and Karen's eyes narrowed. "Ryan, that's enough," she snapped, but Ryan wasn't done. "No, I'm not serving him. He needs to leave, now." The room fell silent, every eye on the confrontation. Samuel reached into his blazer pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made Ryan pause. From his pocket, Samuel pulled a slim leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a badge that gleamed under the restaurant's lights. The letters CIA were unmistakable, etched in bold relief alongside his name and a service number. The room seemed to freeze. Ryan's face drained of color, his mouth half open as he stared at the badge. Karen's eyes widened, and a murmur rippled through the diners. Samuel didn't raise his voice or make a scene. He simply held the badge up long enough for Ryan to process it, then tucked it back into his pocket. "I've spent my life serving this country," he said, his tone measured. "I'd like to enjoy my meal in peace." Ryan stammered, his bravado gone. I didn't know," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Karen stepped forward, her face a mix of shock and fury. "Ryan, back of house now," she ordered, her voice low but firm. Ryan slunk away, his head down, as the dining room buzzed with whispers. Karen turned to Samuel, her expression apologetic. "Mr. Carter, I am so sorry. Your meal is on us tonight. Please let me know how we can make this right." Samuel waved a hand, his smile returning. "No need for that. Just bring me another glass of water, and we'll call it even." Karen nodded, still shaken, and hurried to the bar. Moments later, James arrived, a tall man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and a suit that screamed government work. He slid into the seat across from Samuel, a grin spreading across his face. "You causing trouble again, Sam?" he teased, his voice warm. Samuel chuckled, shaking his head. "Just keeping people on their toes." The two men ordered their meal, and the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But the story of that night spread quickly among the staff. Ryan was suspended by the end of the shift, and Karen made it clear that such behavior wouldn't be tolerated again. Samuel and James, meanwhile, spent the evening reminiscing, their conversations touching on old missions, close calls, and the kind of secrets that never left the shadows. Samuel didn't dwell on the incident with Ryan. He'd faced worse in his career, far worse. But for those who witnessed it, the moment a quiet elderly man silenced a room with a single badge was one they'd never forget. As the night wound down, Samuel left a generous tip, not for Ryan, but for Mia, who'd stayed quiet but kind throughout the ordeal. He and James stepped out into the cool night air, the river reflecting the city lights. "You think he learned something tonight?" James asked, nodding back toward the restaurant. Samuel shrugged, his cane tapping against the pavement. "Some lessons take time," he said. "But I've got plenty of that." The incident at Riverside Grill became a quiet legend in town, a story whispered among waitstaff and shared with new hires as a cautionary tale. Samuel Carter, the man who'd walked in with nothing but a cane and a smile, had shown that appearances could deceive, and that respect was owed to those who'd earned it, whether they carried a badge or not.